name is Kyla Denwood, and I'm a representative with BPIA. So today we're going to be hearing from a ton of people, especially from the Rangel and Pickering programs, and when we have fellows from each of the Foreign Service Fellowships, from Rangel to Payne to Pickering. So thank you guys so much for coming. A few reminders, if we could hold all the questions to the end, we do have a 15-minute Q&A session scheduled for the very end. And if everyone could go ahead and mute their microphones so we can give our full attention to the speakers as they're presenting. So thank you so much. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alexandra Maloney, BPI representative and board member.
Firstly, I'd like to give a shout out to you, Kyla. Excellent work with this program. You and your student colleagues with BPIA are consistently doing the work to help bring these opportunities to your peers and to your fellow friends and colleagues. So I really want to give you that shout out. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Maloney. I am a board member and the Director of Communications with Black Professionals in International Affairs. We are a 501c3 organization on a mission to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in the international affairs field. So that goes the full span of industry, from diplomacy to development, public sector, private sector, multilateral organizations, and the like. We have a number of different programs geared towards both students, recent graduates, mid-level and senior level professionals. Our current community is at a reach of about 2,000 to 3,000. So if you aren't already a member of BPIA, I strongly recommend and invite you to join and find more information about it on our website, which is www.iabpia.org, which if you're here, that means you were able to locate the website and register, which is the first step. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Kyla. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Alexandria. Our first speaker is going to be Lily Lopez McGee, and she is a representative from the Pickering program. She'll be talking about both the Pickering and Pickering and Payne fellowships.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. And I am going to apologize. There's just a slight delay. So if I start to get a little wonky, my colleague Garrick is going to step in the case that my internet goes a little slowly. My name is Dr. Lily Lopez McGee. I currently serve as the director for the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship and have been at Howard University, who administers the fellowship programs since 2016. I work really closely with my colleagues at the Rangel and Payne fellowship programs. Oftentimes when we're out and about recruiting for the programs, we'll often talk about all three together because we essentially like to think of ourselves as cousin and sister fellowship programs. So much of what you'll hear me say will be repeated in a couple of different iterations for the components and that kind of thing. I'll do kind of a high level overview because I know that really the excitement or the exciting piece of the presentation tonight are the fellows. The fellow experiences, I think, is really where you all get to know a little bit about what the personal experience has been going through the fellowship program. So I'll start with the Pickering Fellowship Program. The Pickering Fellowship Program is the oldest of the three fellowship programs. It started in 1992 with the goal of diversifying the State Department's foreign service and increasing excellence in our diplomatic corps. Since then, we have had our first ambassador nomination. We have another one in the pipeline now that we're really excited about, and several of our alumni who are currently serving in assistant secretary positions. And if you know anything about the structure of the Department of State, that means that they're pretty high. The fewer titles you have at the beginning of your name, the higher up you are. So we're excited to be able to offer opportunities for early career folks who are interested in coming into service foreign service officers. The Pickering Fellowship Program will provide up to $84,000 in assistance towards tuition and personal living expenses towards a 2-year master's degree in an area of relevance to the foreign service. And I do have to say all of those things because the criteria for our graduate programs is pretty specific, and we can certainly talk about that in the Q&A if you all are interested. So we will provide the funding for the master's programs, and we will also provide funding for 2 summer internships, one domestic and one overseas. And then after you complete all of the components of the fellowship program, it culminates in a career as a U.S. Department of State Foreign Service Officer. There is a 5-year service obligation at the end of our fellowship program, and that's in part because this is a hiring opportunity. So all 3 of the fellowship programs do end up with a career at the end of it, which is really excellent. It's an excellent opportunity for you to have to receive support during your graduate school experience, and also then have a career waiting for you on the back end. We, in addition to the funding and the internships, we also provide extensive mentorship. Our fellows are paired with a senior level Foreign Service officer who has 10 or more years of experience as a Foreign Service officer, as well as a peer mentor, who is usually someone who's either early or mid-career and has gone through the program that they've participated in. So it's an excellent opportunity to, again, participate in a graduate program and then have a trajectory to get into the State Department's Foreign Service. Our applications are actually open right now for the Rangel and the Pickering programs. Their deadlines are in September. For the Pickering Fellowship Program, our deadline is September 22nd. And we're looking for folks who are looking to go to graduate school next fall. So you are essentially applying to our programs a year in advance of going into your graduate school degree. That doesn't mean that you need to know where it is that you want to go. It just means that you're preparing to go to graduate school next in the next academic year. So folks who are applying this year will be looking to enter a 2-year master's degree at a US-based institution in an area of relevance to the Foreign Service. Think public policy, public administration, business administration, international affairs, economics, regional studies, social work, migration studies. Those are the type of degrees that we would fund. So the selection process is pretty straightforward. You submit all of your materials online by the application deadline. And then we, in late October, will notify 90 finalists that they will move on to a second selection process, which will include an interview and a written exercise. And then shortly thereafter, after that selection process is done in the middle of November, you will know before Thanksgiving whether or not you have funding for graduate school in the next year. So the timeline moves along very quickly, and that is in an attempt to give you all the option to decide if this is something that you want to continue on. If you weren't successful in the first application round, perhaps you want to wait another year to apply again. Or if you are awarded the fellowship program, then moving on to apply to graduate school. So it's a really excellent opportunity, again, if you're interested in diplomacy and getting into the State Department's Foreign Service. I now want to pivot a little bit to Payne. The Payne Fellowship Program is the Donald M. Payne Fellowship Program is for those who are interested in international development, where the Pickering and the Rangel programs go into the State Department's Foreign Service. Our Payne Fellows go into the U.S. Agency for International Development's Foreign Service. And the two types of careers are quite distinct. So the work of our Foreign Service officers in the Department of State is primarily looking at coordination, multilateral and bilateral coordination with ministries and governments in country, working on consular issues and managing the embassies and posts overseas. Our USAID Foreign Service officers are often working on more technical types of grant programming and working with community organizations who might be working in areas such as agriculture, public health, international education, or other areas of technical relevance. Our USAID Foreign Service officers also operate primarily in developing nations. So that means that for our USAID Foreign Service officers, they'll primarily be serving in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and some parts of Eastern Europe. So whereas for the State Department Foreign Service officers, they will serve in any number of the 270 plus locations around the world. So the type of career that you'll be doing as a Payne Fellow once you're done is quite distinct from the Department of State's Foreign Service. And I mention that because as you're looking across the three programs, you might consider either applying to all three if you're interested in all of those, or maybe identifying which one is more aligned with your career interests. The Payne Fellowship Program is actually modeled off of the Rangel program, and I won't take away Garrick's thunder in talking about the Rangel program, but the Payne Fellowship will provide funding for a 2-year master's degree program. It will also provide funding for a 10-week congressional internship, and then funding for an overseas internship at a USAID post. There is also a 5-year service obligation on the after completing the graduate school component. And again, Payne Fellows will go into the USAID Foreign Service after they're done. So that is a bit about the structure. I did not mention the key difference between the Pickering program and the Rangel and the Payne programs, because oftentimes the question that we'll get is, well, what makes them so distinct? So I mentioned the differences between Rangel and Pickering and Payne in terms of where they end up at the end. For the Pickering Fellowship Program, our Pickering Fellows will actually do a domestic internship at the Department of State. So whereas our Rangel and our Payne Fellows do congressional internships for their domestic internship, our Pickering Fellows will do a internship at Maine State, and then they'll do an overseas internship after they complete their graduate school degree. So if you are interested in the Foreign Service at all, I strongly encourage you to consider applying to all three of the programs. They're excellent opportunities, not just to work in international affairs and foreign policy, but it's also a really great opportunity to represent US foreign policy overseas. And I may pause there and pass it off to Garrick, who can talk to you a little bit more about the Rangel program. And then I am happy to take questions when we get to the Q&A piece.
Hi everyone, my name is Garrick Buzzard and I am the program manager for recruitment and compliance for the Rangel program. I've been with Rangel since March of this year, so I'm not as tenured as Lily, but I have been in the international affairs space before that. So the Rangel program is named after Congressman Charles V. Rangel, and it was founded in 2003. So we're not quite as old as the Pickering program, but we've been around for a little while. A lot of what I've said, what I will say will be quite similar to what Lily is saying, but our fellows go into the Foreign Service as well. And the Rangel program has two components. I'll start with the graduate fellowship, and then I will also mention a little bit about our summer enrichment program, which is our undergraduate program. So as Lily was sort of suggesting at the end, there is a structure to the fellowship. Our fellows will do an orientation in May after they've been selected, and from there they will move immediately into their congressional internships, 10-week congressional internship here in Washington, D.C. This summer we had some that were in Washington, D.C. and some who were remote, but we're hopeful to go back to in-person moving forward next year. And then after they complete their congressional internship, they go immediately into graduate school. They'll complete their first year of graduate school at any number of institutions and programs. Similar to the eligibility requirements that Lily mentioned, ours are the same in that they need to be programs relevant to the Foreign Service. They'll complete that first year of graduate school, and then they will go and complete their overseas internship, which is at a U.S. embassy or consulate abroad. And upon completion of that, they will go back and return for their second year of graduate school. And upon completion of graduate school and other program requirements, they will enter into the Foreign Service this summer after they complete graduate school. Our timeline is very similar to the Pickering program's timeline for the fellowship, but it's about a week later. So our application is also open right now, and it will close on September 29th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we will notify 90 finalists on November 4th. And then our selection process will come after Thanksgiving. So it will be between November 29th through December 2nd. And it will include similar elements to the Pickering program, writing, exercise, and an interview. And then on December 3rd, by the end of the day, we will notify 45 fellows who've been selected. And those 45 fellows will do some onboarding materials and get ready to join us in May of 2020 for orientation and then getting ready to start their congressional internships. I did want to take some time to also mention the eligibility requirements for the program. It's U.S. citizenship, a cumulative GPA of 3.2 on a 4-point scale, and then planning to enroll in a new 2-year master's program for fall 2022. And again, in relevance to the Foreign Service, and as Lily listed, there's a great number of programs that are relevant to the Foreign Service, and we're happy to talk a little bit more about that if anyone has specific questions. The application itself has a few elements that we also did want to mention to you, including a couple of written statements. So there is a 600-word or less personal statement that discusses your reasons for wanting to pursue a career in foreign affairs and commitment to the Foreign Service, and any sort of other relevant experiences or information you'd like to provide. A statement on financial need or assistance for attending graduate school. 2 letters of recommendation, one of them from a faculty member and then one from a community leader who can sort of speak on your non-academic potential and accomplishments. And then some proof of citizenship requirement, of course, and then very important, the student aid report generated from the FAFSA, which is something that you can honestly do now if you're interested in applying. Sometimes these student aid reports can take up to a week to sort of process and get generated, so it's always a good idea to get ahead of that early. And then transcripts from any college or university that you had attended for credit, including sometimes study abroad programs don't always show up the same way. So those are the sort of application elements themselves. And again, if you have specific questions about those, we can also get into them a little bit later. My first and largest application tip comes slightly from my background in working in higher ed in one of the grad programs that likes to get Rangel and Pickering fellows, is to keep an eye out on for who you want to be your letter of recommendation writers. I have read many a letter of recommendation in my time, and there's a pretty wide variety between someone who filled in a form letter and someone who really took the time to write about you. So I encourage potential applicants to really identify someone they know will take the time to really write a great letter about you and your accomplishments and your potential. And I want to pivot a little bit to talk slightly about the Summer Enrichment Program, which is our undergraduate program. It happens in the summer, and it's open to anyone with at least sophomore status at the time that they will be starting the program. So sophomores, juniors, and graduating seniors are welcome to apply. It is a 6-week, hopefully again in-person program housed at Howard University, and it's really an experience where our scholars, as we call them, engage with the wide field that is international affairs, and they're exposed to lots of different ideas and career paths, although with an eye towards the State Department, because we always appreciate and love our colleagues at State. It involves 2 courses. There is a course in international economics and a course in diplomatic history, which you can get for credit. We pay for the credits from Howard University, and you are welcome to transfer those back to any institution that you may be attending, as well as a number of other professional and development opportunities and networking with all sorts of different individuals across the spectrum of international affairs. There are folks that are in the corporate space that come to talk to our scholars. There are folks that are in the intelligence space that come talk to our fellows. Obviously, the State Department, there's a great day at the State Department and the Foreign Service Institute, and think tanks, all sorts of folks come to speak to our scholars to really show the wide breadth of careers that they can pursue. We provide for our scholars. We pay for the housing, and they get a $3,200 stipend for the summer, and they also get access to meal cards, and we do programming during the day, 9 to 5-ish, Monday through Friday, but the scholars are in DC and are welcome to use their evenings and their weekends to do as they please, as long as they're still attending class and completing their assignments. And it's really a great opportunity to engage with DC for folks that are, generally interested in international affairs at the undergraduate level, might not know what they want to do yet. It's a great way to find maybe something you're passionate about. We concluded the SEP program a little earlier this summer, and in talking to some of our colleagues that work directly on that, they've already said that many of the SEP scholars have already secured internships from folks that they met over the summer. And so it's a really great opportunity to figure out where you want to go, what you want to do next. With that, I'll pass the baton back and hope to see many questions.
Great, thank you so much, Garrick and Lily. Now it's time to hear from our wonderful fellows. We have 3 amazing women fellows here, actually. And first, I'd like to introduce Tara Lewis, who is a Pickering Fellow. She is a Foreign Service officer currently serving in Washington, D.C. She previously served at the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki, Finland, and the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. Before joining the Foreign Service, Tara worked for a state senator in Northern California. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tara.
Hi, no problem. Glad to be here. And thank you everyone for attending. I'll go ahead and share a little bit more. Thanks for the introduction. So I am currently serving in Washington, D.C. I was a Pickering Fellow, a graduate Pickering Fellow, and began in 2013 when I was applying for, all started, as you heard, with the application process pretty early while I was applying for graduate school. And then I went on to attend UC Berkeley, where I studied public policy for 2 years. And then I did my internships, one at the Department of State here in DC, covering EU issues, and then another one covering in Seoul in South Korea at our US Embassy there, working on economic issues. I've really enjoyed the journey and the process through the fellowship. It was a great way to join the department. I found that specifically being able to do the internships and have a cohort as I was joining was a sort of a fantastic way to not only be introduced to the Foreign Service, but also to get a chance to build sort of my network within the department, friends and colleagues before starting. Before joining the service and before going to graduate school, I worked in California, as was mentioned, for a state senator, and before that studied anthropology in college, which I've found also extremely helpful, though it was not at all intentional. I sort of had a bit of a winding path to end up where I am. I'm happy to talk a little bit about myself, but I also am happy to take questions initially or be guided sort of however we would like to do that.
Yeah, sure. I have a first initial question. What
Sure.
was you said you had a winding path. What sort of was that winding path before you discovered the fellowship?
Sure, yeah. So originally, I always knew I wanted to work in public service. I grew up in the military. My father was in the Air Force, so I grew up overseas, mostly in Germany, and then sort of liked studying languages and thought, I don't know, I'll do something in international affairs. And after college, thought I wanted to do journalism for a while, sort of did internships in that and things like that. And I worked at a food co-op while I was studying for the LSAT, which I eventually, luckily, did not go to law school. Apologies to any lawyers. But, it was actually my brother who found the fellowship and told me, I think you would be great. And I think the Foreign Service would be a great match. He had studied at Georgetown School of Foreign Service, so he was sort of more familiar with the DC scene than I was, and forwarded both the Pickering and the Rangel program to me. I sat on it and missed the Rangel deadline, and then applied to the Pickering Fellowship, and was lucky enough to make it through the process. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm happy to share more or answer anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And another question would be, what differences did you notice in terms of your path into the Foreign Service as a Pickering Fellow versus just someone that took the test and got in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a huge advantage to entering the Foreign Service as a fellow. Some of the advantages have sort of been mentioned already by Lily and Garrick about, you have these opportunities to do internships within the department, whether it's the overseas internship or the domestic internship as a Pickering Fellow, that really give you a sense of how we work. We're a giant organization. And so with being such a large organization, we have a very unique culture. Sometimes, good, sometimes bad, like any large organization. And it can be kind of a culture shock for people when they join the department without any sort of initial exposure, whether that is, or whether that was doing an internship or growing up as, in the Foreign Service, as some of our colleagues have. And so I think that advantage is huge, because it means that when you start in altogether with your new cohort, which we call in A100, which is the training class that you join when you join the department, you sort of already have this knowledge of how things work. And so, for example, when I joined, I had the 6-week orientation class, A100, and then I think within a month, I ended up going to my first post. So there was almost no time to really even wrap my head around where it was I was going. In Helsinki I did political economic work, and I had already done economic work and some political work, mostly economic work at Maine State in Washington, D.C. And so I was able to sort of hit the ground running with my job. And my colleagues and my bosses actually commented on that. People were very willing to trust me with things. I sort of knew how to draft our memos. I had already written cables when I did my internship in Seoul. And so I felt very comfortable and was able to sort of acclimate to the job really quickly. And it gave me sort of a better sense. And then from the sort of non-professional side, I found it a huge advantage to enter the department with my Pickering cohort. We're all still very close. I keep in touch with people. I've gotten the opportunity, actually, I served with at least two colleagues from my fellowship program when I was in Mexico, because it's a big post. And even there were, I think, maybe 15 of us who were fellows from both Rangel and Pickering Fellowship. And we would do barbecues and get together. And when you're, and that sounds sort of normal, because we're used to, you have maybe your friends in college and your friends in your hometown and things like that. But when you're overseas, it can really be difficult to sort of build community quickly, especially because people are coming and going so frequently. And so to have that, even if you don't have it at your current overseas post, you still have it via social media, via WhatsApp groups, all of that, and you can sort of share and exchange ideas. So I found that to be those are probably the two biggest advantages, I would say.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. And everyone, if you have any questions for Tara or our representatives, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and we can get to them at the end of the discussion today. Next, I would love to introduce Christina Jane Presmy, who is a brand new Rangel Fellow. Christina Jane Presmy is a proud Haitian American from Fort Myers, Florida. She attended Florida A&M University, earning her associate's degree, and graduated in May 2021 with her bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in disaster management from Florida Atlantic University. Christina studied abroad in Accra, Ghana during her freshman year, leading to her discovery of the U.S. Foreign Service. In fall 2020, she went through a rigorous Charles B. Rangel Fellowship process and is now a 2021 Charles B. Rangel Fellow. Thank you for joining us today, Christina, and I'm guessing everyone is very excited to hear from you, especially as you're a brand new fellow, and what you're interested in the program and how your application process went.
Yes, hi everyone. I am Christina, and I'm currently in Ghana doing my master's degree at Webster University in international relations. And yes, I just went through the process. So around this time last year, I was looking at the fellowship. I just found out that I was about to graduate. I did not know. I thought I had a whole other year to figure out what I wanted to do. But then I knew about the fellowship, so I decided to apply for all 3 of them. And I applied just because I found out I thought I wanted to do law school coming into college. And then I had that study abroad experience where I was introduced into the international affairs world. So I decided to go towards that path. And the fellowships just seemed like they were great support all the way into and beyond entry into my dream career. Plus the grad school funding and, preparation all drew me to apply. So insight into the application process. I would say the application process was very stressful for me, if I'm being honest, just because I didn't have a lot of background into foreign service, right? I didn't really know what I was getting into. So I was working on my essay every day at 8 a.m. with the writing center because I really wanted it. I'm constantly going over my application, rewatching these webinars and informational sessions to really know what I was applying for. And then focusing on the essays, I think, is the most important part. What I'm looking forward to most with the fellowship, I would say, is the U.S. Embassy internship that's coming up this summer. I'm wanting to focus in on the African region, so applying for some of those locations. And then my first tour, of course. This summer, I did my congressional internship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and mine was completely virtual. So that was a really good experience, just how these programs connect you with Congress, and you get to find out, like, you know, how Congress plays a role in foreign policy. So all of those things with the fellowship, I think, is great. Just the fact that you get that background knowledge before you jump in. I do have a lot of tips for the application process since I just went through it. My first would be not to hold back in your application. I think if you did it, it should be in there because there's a way that you can tie it in to how it can help you become a foreign service officer and be in the foreign service and be successful. So I wouldn't hold back no matter how big or small you think it is. I would start making a list if you're going to apply of every involvement, no matter big or small, that you did during your college career, both in the community and on your campus. I think that's going to really help you narrow down like what you did. Even me, when I was applying, there were things that I did that I forgot about or I didn't even think of. I wouldn't have thought of if I didn't go through that whole thing. So I think that's helpful. Working with someone to review your application, especially the essays that is in the foreign service field, and then also like a writing center representative, someone who's really good at writing, is helpful. And you want to be working on telling your story as clear as you can and as much as you can, but in as concise as you can as well. So as little words as possible. And I think working with a writing center representative is super helpful for that. Making sure that your letter of recommendations have a general idea of what it is that you're applying for. For me, at least, I know my recommendations, or people that I asked, they didn't really know what the foreign service was or like what a foreign service officer does. So it was kind of hard for them to like mold their letter into, you know, being helpful for me to apply for the fellowship. So just providing them with the website and things to read briefly about what it is you're applying for so that they know and your letter can be helpful. Knowing the 13 dimensions and letting them shine through in your application is always helpful. Just finding different ways to plug those in. I put doing a little bit every day. So this process can get overwhelming very quickly. So for me, I just took it one day at a time, like maybe do the general information section and then the next day do that section and be working on your essay. Set aside time for that because that's super important. And then my last piece of advice would be to just tell the story that only you can tell and remember that you are qualified to be here and apply for this and get it. So only you know why you're here, why you're applying to be a foreign service officer, what's drawing you to this field, the impact that you want to make, and just let that shine through your application. And I think you guys will be fine. Also, if anyone has any questions, I'm always open to answering anything.
Great, thank you so much, Christina. And once again, Christina is joining us from Ghana, so thank you so much. I know the internet connection is probably super hard to tune through, but yeah, it's been very helpful, especially your tips. So thank you so much for joining us today. And last but not least, we have Naisha Ford here representing the Payne Fellowship. Naisha Ford joined USAID in June 2021 through the Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program entry pathway to the Career Candidate Corps. Naisha's interest in public health started when she worked as a maternal and child health volunteer in Rwanda under the United States Peace Corps. During her 2 years in Rwanda, Naisha was able to work with local health officials on WASH programs, malaria education, and food security. Over the summer of 2020, Naisha completed her graduate school fieldwork with USAID Uganda, where she had the responsibility to co-draft and edit 3 documents for the malaria reduction activity under the PMI team and help execute the Uganda Mission's 2020 operational plan. Naisha received her Master of Public Health and Tropical Medicine from Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, where she earned the Charles C. Bass Award for the Outstanding Student in the MPH and TM program. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Biochemistry from the College of St. Benedict University. Naisha speaks conversational Kinyarwanda and is a beginner in French. Thank you so much for joining us today, Naisha.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for such a warm introduction. So kind of based on my introduction, you can see how I got into international development. Before I applied to the Payne Fellowship, I actually, like my other panelists, didn't actually want to go into international development. I thought I was going to be a doctor. So like you lawyers, I thought I was going to be a doctor. So I did a lot of service work in undergrad, and I was always very interested in health. In that service work, I had the opportunities to go abroad. So I was able to go to the Dominican Republic, Peru, and I also did a study abroad in Italy. And it was that type of work that got me really interested in other cultures, and especially health in other cultures. As my bio said, from there I went to the Peace Corps, and that's really how I got interested in international development. A lot of my work there had to do with malaria. And when you're in a developing country doing malaria, it's almost impossible to see the USAID sign somewhere. So that was kind of how I got introduced to USAID and international development. How I heard about the Payne Fellowship was actually just through connections. Like another panelist member said, someone sent me a link and was like, this looks like something that you would be really great at. This looks like exactly where your passions lie. And I was like, okay, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school after I was done with Peace Corps. And everything was pretty serendipitous as far as how the Payne Fellowship and graduate school aligned. So then I applied for the Payne Fellowship. I got it, and I ended up going to Tulane. So I'm a 2019 Payne Fellow, and that's also when I started to go to Tulane. As a Payne Fellow, like they said, I got to work in Congress on the Hill in person then. And it was nice because I actually did get to work with a Rangel fellow. We were both in the same congressional office, which was really fun to just, be able to work together. After that, like my bio said, I did my international internship with USAID Uganda. Unfortunately, that was last year, so it ended up being virtual, but it was still a really good experience just to network and still see how a mission kind of functions and the work that they do. And also, like my bio said, I just joined USAID this June. So I'm a new Foreign Service officer. I'm currently in DC, and for a global health officer, I will be doing a rotation with global health for a year. When I figure out my assignment, I may be here a little bit longer, depending on if I need to do a language, but I'm happy to talk more about the USAID process because like Lily said, it's a little bit different, but yeah, I'm really excited to be here and happy to answer any other questions.
Great, thank you so much, Naisha. We can go ahead and move into the question and answer session right now. And I see there are a few questions in the chat that we need to get answered. So we can start with Busani. Is the master's in forensic accounting eligible for any of the programs?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. So the graduate fellowship programs generally require that the programs be a little bit broader in curriculum. So forensic accounting is probably too specific for the fellowship programs here. I'm going to drop in a couple of links so that folks can do a little bit of research on the different foreign service tracks for the State Department and USAID. For USAID, it's helpful to look at what they call their backstops. They're essentially the technical expertise that folks bring with them into the service and is generally the focus of their work, like NYSHA and public health and that kind of thing. For the State Department's Foreign Service, they have the 5 career tracks. And usually you're looking at graduate degree programs that would fit into the career tracks. Ultimately, for the Rangel and the Pickering programs, we're looking at programs that will help you become a generalist. All of our fellows become foreign service generalists, which means that they have to navigate lots of different types of workspaces, and they're not necessarily going into depth in specific technical areas. And I'm giving you all of this background because I know that the question often comes up about, and in this case, it's forensic accounting, but it could be any number of other more technical degrees. So what I might suggest is if that you're really interested in the programs, you might look at MBA programs with a focus in accounting. And that would get you to the point where you're meeting the requirement for the fellowship program, and you're also studying something that is of interest to you. And it's the same thing with other more technical areas. Perhaps you're really interested in urban planning, but maybe you're flexible in terms of which foreign service you're interested in entering. For the Rangel and the Pickering Fellowship Program, you would need to go back a little bit in terms of being a little bit broader and look at maybe doing a public policy degree with a focus in international urban planning. For the Payne program, the programs could fund technical expertise related to the backstop. So again, look at the backstops to see how you might be able to fit in the graduate degree programs that you might be looking at. And I'm going to jump to the next question that came up about graduate programs as well, with regard to whether or not they can be US. What does this US-based institution mean? And the important thing to note here is that our programs are federal programs. So we're using federal dollars to go to support our fellows. So the program is going to support US-based institutions. Our funding has to go to a US-based institution. Many of the American universities abroad have a different model. They're not US institutions. They're more of a franchise of the American university, which is a little bit distinct. There are graduate programs such as the School for Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins, the program that Christina's on with Webster University, that are US institutions. We are paying a US institution on behalf of your tuition. So that is sort of the requirement that we have. We have to be paying the US institution. So if there's an international component to it, the work on your transcript has to be coming from that primary US-based institution. So it's a great question because sometimes it can get a little bit sticky. If you do have a specific question about a program that you might be looking at, our program staff is open to taking a look at it and giving you general feedback, right? So if there's one that you're looking at and you're like, does this fit the model? We can say, you know, that the curriculum looks like something it is that we would approve. So again, if you have other questions about graduate programs, we'd welcome that at any point.
Great. It looks like next we have a question from Crystal. Crystal, you can feel free to unmute and ask your question, but if not, I can just read it aloud.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. I would just like to know if you need to mention a specific foreign service cone in your application for Rangel and Pickering, or would you prefer that it's more general?
Our fellows are in a unique situation where they don't actually have to choose their career tracks until after they've entered the program. And for both of the Pickering and the Rangel programs, they would have done at least one internship at the Department of State before making their career track choice. And I say that to say that we don't expect you to have your career track selected by the time that you're applying to the programs. Part of the benefit of joining through the fellowship programs is it gives you time to explore each of the different career tracks. If you are set on one and you believe that that's the career track that's for you, you're welcome to mention it. But again, you don't have to at this point. There is a question in our applications that asks you to rank order the career tracks in your order of preference. That's just for statistical purposes for us to get a sense of where folks are, but you're not beholden to it at the point of application. Again, we pair you with foreign service officers so that you can kind of explore which one is a good match for your areas of interest.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lily. So Nardo says, I saw online that all the current Pickering fellows speak one other language besides English. I'm concerned my chances are low of getting chosen because my second language is only beginner level. Is that a big factor in being selected? And a follow-up question to that is, do any of the fellows know any second languages, and did they know those second languages during the application process?
I'm also happy to take the first one, stab at the first one. So our fellows will often come with foreign language experience and international experience, but it is not a requirement for our fellowship program. We are looking for folks who are committed to public service and are interested in international affairs. And there are many ways for you to exhibit and match the mission of our programs through the experiences that you've had. So you do not have to have a foreign language proficiency at the time that you're applying to the programs. In fact, and I think I heard Naisha mention training, there is a training component to the Foreign Service, so that if you are, for example, because you have to be worldwide available, if you're placed in Indonesia and you don't know Bahasa, which many folks do not, I would not if I was in that position, the State Department will train you on that language. So while language can be one mechanism for demonstrating your interest in international affairs, utilize the skills that you have, right? So rather than spending time on the things that you perhaps do not bring with you at the time that you're applying to the program, tell us about all the other amazing things that you've been able to do. Perhaps you've worked with communities here in the United States as a way to build bridges or to do some intercultural work. Perhaps you are attending an institution that's outside of your region, and that has been a cultural transition for you. There are a number of ways where you can exhibit those skills, and I would encourage you to highlight things that you do have, and highlight everything in the kitchen sink. I say this really often, and I don't think people take me seriously, but there are some really core skills that come from service work, from working with people in service industries, and that kind of thing. So don't leave those things out. Tell the selection panel really what's made you you and the experiences that have gotten you to the point where you're applying to these fellowship programs.
Great. And did any of the fellows know any languages coming in that they thought was helpful? Or was it more so just the process of learning a language that helped you?
So I did come in with, or right now, when I was applying, I had Haitian Creole. So that's the other language that I had.
Yeah, when I was applying, like I said, I just finished the Peace Corps, so I knew Kinyarwanda.
I did enter the service with German, and I studied French in high school. But I think, I know lots of folks, also people who are not fellows in the Foreign Service who've never left the United States and joined the Foreign Service, and they go through the testing process and interviews and stuff like that. And I know that there's a lot of ways that they demonstrated their interest in foreign affairs and serving the United States and representing the United States abroad. And also there are so many ways without leaving the US, without having mastered a language, that you can show that you've engaged with foreign cultures, that you've thought about issues related to foreign policy, and that you've even just attempted to study something outside of your comfort zone. So that's my advice. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We did have a question submitted by a BPIA member that could not make it tonight, but she was wondering, so these fellowship programs are for to increase diversity among the Foreign Service. How have the fellows experienced living as Black women in the Foreign Service? Especially, I think this was more towards Naisha and Tara, sorry.
Sure, I'm happy to start. Right, so that is the goal, and obviously diversity comes in lots of forms in the department, and are in the US, and in its goal of being more broadly represented in the department. I can speak to my sort of personal experience. I think overall I've found, I think as I mentioned, having sort of my community through my cohort, my Pickering cohort, and also my A100 cohort to be extremely helpful and supportive, broadly speaking. There are still representation issues in the department. I mean, this was in the news last year, and the Government Accountability Office sort of released their report, right? And for example, I think the statistic for Black women in the Foreign Service is 2%. Which is obviously low. But that said, right, there's a lot of ways, at least personally, where I've definitely felt that acutely. And then there are also times when I've also felt very supported, not just by my Pickering and A100 colleagues, but by sort of everyone in the department, because the culture in the Foreign Service is also one of, as I mentioned, it's unique, not just the State Department, but the Foreign Service within that, and people do sort of really support each other. And I had a lot of good experiences. My first tour, I had a really supportive direct supervisor and deputy chief of mission who very much sort of just emphasized giving me sort of the exposure I needed, trusting me, giving me responsibilities, and sort of appreciating that. And also with an awareness that my experience was not their experience. That hasn't always been the case. I've definitely sort of engaged with other people who are surprised that I'm in the job that I am in, or sort of confused, or sort of have, say sort of negative things sometimes about the fellowship, often unintentionally. But then there are also people like in my current office who, when they found out that I was a fellow, were really excited to have me in their office. So I will say, I don't know that's the direct answer. I think it's complicated and I think it's very individual. So I'll leave it at that. But happy to also, if folks are want to hear more, I'm happy to speak to folks as well. Thanks.
Yeah, and I don't have too much more to add than what Tara said. I think that, I am relatively new. I've definitely heard some things, but I've also heard that, kind of like what Tara was saying, if you surround yourself with people who are really supportive, and just really have that, support bubble around you, it can definitely be not as bad coming in. I guess I'll say that. I'm still very much connected to all the people that I came in with. We still have like our WhatsApp group still is very active. So I definitely haven't felt anything personally as a Black woman starting in the Foreign Service. And yeah, I think I agree. It's probably very personal.
Great, thank you. One question that seems to be popping up a lot is the age of fellows. So what is the average age, and does age factor into the application process?
So the age of our fellows ranges from cohort to cohort. There are folks who come directly from undergrad, and there are folks who have had 10 plus years of work experience. And it really depends on the candidate's ability to connect their interest for the programs and the career as a foreign service officer to why it is that they're applying to it now, right? So I know that one of the questions had asked, how do you make yourself competitive if you've been out of school for a while, or perhaps talking about the financial need statement, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit too. One of the things is to tie it to the purpose of the program. This is a hiring pipeline into the Foreign Service. All three of the programs are hiring pipelines into the Foreign Service, and we're looking for folks who are committed to public service, international affairs, and that they are seeking entrance into grad school, right? So our fellows do tend to be a little bit younger, in part because many folks now are pursuing graduate school degrees at a younger age. But again, there's not necessarily an age requirement. It's how it is that you tell your story and your connection to the mission and vision of both of the programs that you're applying to. I will say that for those who are a little bit further out from undergrad, the financial need becomes a little bit interesting because you may not have access to your financial aid award letter from your senior year, or there might be things that maybe you have some savings built up, and that may make your student aid report look a little bit different. All three of the programs have a financial need statement that we look at. And our selection panel will read that 400-word statement very closely to get a sense of what it is that your need is for graduate school. That's the perfect place to talk about any nuances in your financial need for graduate school. And let's just be honest, all of us have some express need for graduate school. If we're looking at some of the top international affairs schools, they're somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 a year, right? But what about your personal situation makes it imperative that you have funding assistance for graduate school, right? And we know that the financial need is expressed in a multitude of different ways, but our selection panel cannot make that assessment unless you tell us what's happening, right? So the student aid report will give us one snapshot of your aid. There is also a space for you to include information about loans and anything else that you have in terms of financial commitments. the statement is really intended for you to provide some nuance to that. Perhaps if you're close to your undergraduate degree, maybe your parents have no involvement at all in providing assistance for you because you have siblings in college, or perhaps someone went through a medical tragedy recently and medical bills are through the roof. There are lots of directions we can go in that area. That's not necessarily going to be something that comes up immediately in the numbers that you present. So the financial needs statement should be a space where you're telling us what it is that you need, perhaps what your family background is, your socioeconomic background is, and what it is that you'll need for graduate school. So again, don't assume that the selection committee will just know based on what the data is in front of them. Tell them what it is that has brought you to this opportunity at this point to help fund your degree.
Great, thank you. And I see we have two final questions. The first one is, does having a graduate degree already make you ineligible for the program? And the second one is just clarification on a previous question, but would you be able to be eligible for the program if you were, say, at an American university like NYU, but took like a year off to go to like NYU Abu Dhabi, or like Johns Hopkins SAIS, but with their Italy program? Would that still be something you're eligible to do?
I will happily take the question on US-based institutions, and I think that Christina is a great example of how you make that work. Christina is attending Webster University, which is a US-based school, but in Ghana, and that's how we define a US-based institution. So the NYU program in Abu Dhabi, as long as it is based from NYU, would meet that requirement. Similarly, so does the Johns Hopkins SAIS program, where you can go to, I believe, Bologna and Nanjing in Italy and in China. They're both US-based programs, and so they will count for both or all three of the fellowship programs.
Also, I do want to add really quickly, with Webster, the cool thing is it is based in St. Louis, Missouri, but they have global campuses everywhere. So like I'm in Ghana, but they have one in Thailand, Netherlands, China, literally all over the place. So my degree is actually still going to say the US on it. It's still going to look like I was in school in the US, even though I am in Ghana, and I can still study abroad at the other global campuses. So it's a really cool program if anyone's interested.
And I'll just make a quick note about previous graduate degrees. If you have received a graduate degree before, that doesn't automatically make you ineligible. In fact, you can still apply to the program. I would just think very carefully about the type of degree, your second degree, and what that would mean. Because the programs are need-based, we are looking at folks' need for to attend graduate school. If you're looking at if you have graduated with a master's in public administration and you're looking at applying to another master's in public administration, we might question whether or not that's the best use of funding. If you're a career transitioner, that might look different, right? We've had several of our fellows who have had previous master's degrees, but they've been in areas that are very distinct from what it is that we would fund. We've had folks who have come in as former teachers, where they were teaching, they had a master's degree in educational psychology, for example. They were making the pivot into international affairs. So part of it would depend on which graduate programs it is that you're interested in applying to. Again, you're eligible to apply. I would just think critically about the graduate programs it is that you're interested in now in pursuing during for the purposes of these fellowship programs.
Great, and that about wraps up our time for this program. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining. It's definitely been super informative, and I'm guessing, everyone learned a ton of new information that they did not know previously. And we do have another program coming up. Let me just share my screen really quickly. So that about wraps up for this presentation, but we will have another program coming up next month. That's an introduction to international travel and language scholarships, the Critical Language Scholarship and the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship. To get more information about what BPIA is up to, please visit our website. We also have a career fair happening next month on September 30th that I believe everyone should try stopping by. We'll have a bunch of amazing representatives there as well that you can speak to. And then there will be a post-event survey that I'll be circulating afterwards, just to get your ideas on what other events BPIA could have running. But once again, thank you so much to our panelists, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.